member of the Hydrogen team at Shopify. I'm a software engineer. I was lucky enough to join the company just before the launch of Hydrogen version 1. So yeah, this is not a talk about being spicy about version 1 with React Server components versus version 2, but we will be talking about what it meant for us to transition and some of the benefits. Just a bit about myself. I've been working around the e-commerce ecosystem for about 12 years. I've worked with many different brands. I've also had the chance of working with multiple frameworks, multiple headless architectures, including statically generated commerce sites, working in the edge, server-side rendering, and so on. And the one lesson is that headless commerce is hard. So what is Hydrogen? We had Alexandra today talking about Hydrogen, but it's Shopify's open source stack for headless commerce. So it's currently being used by multiple brands, including Allbirds, Tommy and Camp, many others that I'm not allowed to say, some of them who are here. So let's go back to 2022, where Hydrogen 1 launched. And Hydrogen version 1 definition was a full React framework for building storefronts. That meant that, that it was built with React. And it was the first framework to implement the very early version of React Server components together with the React team. And it was also utilizing Vite for all the build tool behind the scenes. The architecture looked a little bit like this. So these are just Shopify's APIs. Here's a storefront API, which gives you, the cart collection product, and also the Shopify admin, where you can host, and it behaves like your dashboard for your e-commerce store, as well as your Hydrogen deployments. The architecture back then for Hydrogen meant that we had to take care of routing, data fetching, dev server, all of the same things that Remix takes care for us. And on top of that, we were innovating with React Server components. On top of that, our team had to really focus on commerce abstractions and commerce best practices. In other words, creating templates for our merchants to, get started faster. And we have also an Oxygen layer, which is a sister product for Hydrogen, which allows us to host Hydrogen deployments in the edge. So this is me. This is my view in 2022. I'm in Mexico, relaxing. I just joined the team. I'm really eager to kind of contribute to the team, full of ideas. I get back to the office after 10 days, and I find out that Shopify has acquired Remix. Yes, this was a big shock. I just joined the team. I was really excited to work in a framework, and what is this? So anyway, soon after, thanks to the leadership, the Remix team, we got a new vision for Hydrogen, and it was still very exciting. The vision was to really focus our team in e-commerce and delivering value with Remix for e-commerce applications. So the definitions change, and now Hydrogen is more of a set of tools and utilities, best practices, starting points to leverage the power of Remix for e-commerce. And the architecture now looks a little bit different. Now Hydrogen is a set of libraries and tools, and we leave Remix to do what they do best. So we get a bit of the best of the two worlds here. So here, let's take a quick look at what we mean by Hydrogen. I'm not going to trust the demo gods, so I kept my videos locally. So yeah, this is just our demo store. It is a starting point, just a home page with multiple sections, a collections listing page. We can go into a collection page showing a list of products. We have a little filtering. Here's our product page, add to cart. We have a fully working cart. We also have account working, sign in, register, as well as searching for the store. So this could be your starting point. You can also choose just to start from, I don't want any of this, I just want to have the bare minimum. But this is going to be important going forwards in the next slides. So why Remix? So bear in mind, these are my takes. So okay, for me, there's like the first group of reasons is, let's call them shortcomings of version 1. The first one was, it was very new. There was a lot of new concepts. React server components were very new. There was still not a lot of agreement on some of the APIs. Use client, use server didn't quite exist. We had .client, .server files. And that proved a little bit difficult for our merchants to grasp. And sometimes we noticed that some of the benefits of RSC were being diminished by not understanding how to use it. We also lacked like a strong server-side story, which meant that a lot of our flows were on the client side, once again diminishing some of the benefits of a full implementation like Remix. More importantly, we lacked nested layouts as well, which made data fetching not be optimized when switching routes. And streaming and RSC proved pretty hard for certain areas such as meta tags, error handling, and handling simple things like redirects due to the nature of streaming. TLDR is that the framework was still new. It just needed a little bit more time to mature, to maybe get there, but it wasn't fully there. Second set of reasons is what we saw from our early adopters. And this quote from Gary Bernhardt, for me, summarizes very well a lot of this talk, which is the behavior you see in a tool used for is the behavior that the tool encourages. So some of the learnings were that with React Server components in V1, you could fetch data anywhere. You could fetch data in your components, and it felt amazing because you could like co-locate data fetching with your component UI, and it felt really good. Unfortunately, this came with some issues that I will be explaining later. Also, observing and debugging this new architecture became pretty difficult, especially since our runtime was at the edge. Also, many common libraries simply did not play well with .server, .client, and these for people migrating into the platform, proved pretty hard because some people were pretty committed to some libraries that were not supported. It also venturing into some of the code bases, we saw a lot of complexity, and this proved pretty difficult for some merchants to be competitive with, to make sure that their junior developers were productive. And the TLDR here is that it was just hard. It really was hard. There was a lot going on, a lot of new concepts, and people were not succeeding with it. Finally, on the third set of reasons, these are like maybe why Shopify. So for Shopify, I just believe that Remix was it's just a great foundation to build not just Hydrogen, but also to build many other internal tools, and especially considering that React Router is widely adopted in the company. So this is just, in my personal opinion, there's a disclaimer there. This is all me. Yeah, it just seems like an easier transition for the company. Okay, so let's talk about migration now. Okay, so the first lessons learned are about data fetching and how. So let me just backtrack here. One of the beautiful things that happened to us is that we had already this demo store in V1. So when we were going to migrate it, we not only knew the code base really well, but we're going to have a comparison point between where we ended up versus where we were. And this is just beautiful. So I'm going to be sharing in the next few slides a lot of the comparisons between V1 and V2. So data fetching. Yeah, I mean, this is not valid React. I just wanted to kind of like illustrate a little tree of a collection page with a collection grid, and then rendering items and each item having an image, an option selector for like the color of the variant, and an add to cart. So in V1, as a developer, you could choose to fetch data at any of these points. You could choose to fetch data at the root and fetch all of the products with all of the data. You could also choose to not do that, but do it in the collection grid component. Or you could do a mixture of both. You could fetch some data at the root and then let the grid fetch a little bit more of that data. And the same would go on down the tree, all the way down to the selector. In V2 with Remix, this is just not possible. In V2, we have loaders, and we know where we're going to fetch it, and we know that we can consume it everywhere. And here, ignore my comment. In reality, you can consume it everywhere. But there's a difference between. So the point here is the difference between fetching anywhere versus, the mental model of knowing where things are being fetched. So in that tiny example, things look rosy, and it's not too great, an illustration. But I have another more real example from a production project. So here's a project that had 30 routes. And out of these 30 routes, I went ahead and tried to find all the places where any querying was done. So from the 30 routes, I found 31 instances of fetching an external service, either Shopify or a third-party CMS. So this looks pretty similar to what a Remix app would look like. You have like a one-to-one relationship with, between the routes and the number of queries to some degree. But in V1, we could fetch anywhere. So when I expanded the search to look in the whole code base, not just in the routes, that number went from 31 to 67. So what that means is that you have 30 routes, and there's 31 different type of queries. But then you also have to look at all the queries in all the other components. So now you have 69 different places where you have to debug the potential issues. So I don't. There are pros and cons here. I'm just trying to highlight some of the things that we saw. But one of the issues here for us was observability. And how to trace the issues in a deeply nested tree. In version 2 with Remix, as we have seen here, we're just thinking about loaders and or API routes, but the main model of being the loader. And we can still have some of the benefits that we had before, because we can use defer. And for example, in this example, we can await the above the fold component, but we can then choose to defer the recommended products because we know that they're not going to be needed on the first load. Lessons learned, progressive enhancements. So here's the definition from NDN, and it's just a design philosophy that provides a baseline for essential content and functionality. So here's version 1, demo store. Here's version 2, and here's Next.js. That doesn't mean to be spicy, but I just want to illustrate a point. Next.js e-commerce store, which, by the way, looks great. What do you think is going to happen when we disable JS? So this is what V1 looked like. This is what V2 looks like. This is what Next.js e-commerce looks like. So what's happening here, obviously, is that with fetching an RSC level, we are streaming the payloads, but we need a runtime to replace the payloads into the right place. So React Server components still require a little bit of JavaScript just to replace. And of course, they look pretty bad because there isn't fallbacks here. In the Next.js, they have a fallback in the header, but not in the hero. So I know, like a lot of people say, oh, it's not about not having JavaScript. I believe that the key here is that it's true that it's not about not having JavaScript, but it's true that there is also a time before JavaScript, whilst JavaScript is loading. So for that, I have a couple of little videos. So here's version 1. Version 1 had a card implementation, which was client-side, because we didn't have mutations. So here, I'm loading and trying to add to cart as quick as possible. And you can see the GraphQL request. I'm going to play it again. Click, 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 nothing, nothing, nothing. Then you get the add to cart. Because you have to wait for JavaScript, obviously. In V2, thanks to Remix, we can load, click, and it just works. So here, we're just in an MPA environment until JavaScript kicks in. So as soon as you click, we're not really opening sliding cart, but we are actually redirecting to like a cart route that is able to render the cart as well. Thank you. Okay, back to where we were. So this is important not just for the cart, it's important for many other places, right? So sign in, this means that sign in would also work. It means for create account, searching, switching locales, etc. One more thing here. I believe that progressive enhancements is like a foundation to make things better. So now that we know that we can operate really well in MPA environments, this is where JavaScript should come and add its flair. So here's a couple of other little videos. Here we have, this is version 1 without any optimistic UI. We add to cart, and there's delay for the item to show. That's because we're waiting for the storefront API to respond, and then the state gets revalidated, then we can show the items. With V2, we can leverage optimistic UI as we've shown. Yeah, maybe I need to drink some water. Okay, we can leverage optimistic UI, and here's what it's available now. We can be optimistic about adding the item, adding another one instantly. We can quickly react. And what I want you to notice here is that, again, it's your developer decision to decide what's going to be optimistic, what is not going to be optimistic. So if you look at this video again, just check out the total down here. That is not optimistic. So let's do it again. So I'm going to add more. Nothing's happening. And then when the response comes from the storefront API, it's actually using the return value from the storefront API. And the reason you don't want to do that is because there can be discounts and all of these other things that you don't want to be simulating that. Okay. Okay, I'm running a little late here. Okay, yeah, finally, and probably one of my favorite ones is state management. Okay, so here's V1. This is to me searching the V1 demo store, and we found 40 instances of use state across different places. A lot of that had to do with form validation, but not all of it. How many do you think we're going to have in V2? No, come on. Nine. Okay. Now, oh. Come on. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there is 9. I don't know if you saw the collection filter little slide out when we showed the demo. That wasn't on V1, so that's consuming, I think, a couple of those. So, cool. So how did this happen? This happens a lot because we're doing a lot of server-side. Like our whole cart implementation now, it's living on this server. And because Remix just provides great primitives like use matches, which allows us to access the tree everywhere. And if you don't have a lot of use state, it means that you have a lot of less use effects, and you have a lot of less complexity overall. So the next one is the context providers. V1, just at the root, we had 2, like a Shopify provider, and we had a cart provider. If you were in a product page, you also have a product provider. In B2, there are none. In B2, we can, once again, defer the cart at the root, and we can use matches anywhere in the app, and we have a use cart hook. There's no need to be creating a dual state here. So again, for junior developers, this is just a big thing. So the elephant in the room is, what about performance? So here's B1. B1 was really performant. There was nothing wrong with performance. I'm running a little late, but I'm just about to finish. Yeah, so great scores, 97 and 100. And V2, this is the time I took the screenshot. Sometimes it was one off. I just wanted to make sure that I took one where it's like 1%, 1 point down. And the reason is that the morale here is that they're both great technologies. They goes back to the point of Ken earlier today. That a lot of these frameworks are going to do a good job if you know how to use them. The important thing here is what this meant in terms of simplicity, maintainability, and productivity for our merchants. And again, it just goes back to the same quote. I believe strongly that Remix encourages you to learn web APIs and encourages you to, to take care of primitives and make sure that you're not over abstracting things away. And it's just a great mental model that just carries through a lot of code bases that I've had access to. Finally, one of our partners who had experience with both versions, they've seen 3 to 4 times more productivity with using V2. Once again, because it's just a lot easier for junior developers and medium developers to be able to get going and be productive. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, finally, this is my last slide, and this is separating you from having a well-deserved break. We are just, this is what our team is focusing on. We're trying to, demo store, we've purposely left a lot of the code in user land. We don't want to try and over-abstract, but we've been putting away some RFCs, just to make sure that we get some community feedback in terms of the card abstraction. We really want to make sure that pagination, we create components that are, tied to the platform, tied to Remix ways, but just focus on use cases for e-commerce. And also, improve developer experience. We want to, improve our types generation, integration with Oxygen, and more importantly, again, our team's focus now is to make sure that every time there is a new feature from Shopify, we have the bandwidth to go in there and integrate it with Hydrogen as quick as possible. And some of those are, the newer ones are Shopify Web Pixel, B2B, and Meta Objects content. So yeah, just get in touch. Here's some of my personal details, and thank you very much. I'm 3 minutes late, but yeah, thank you.